Milk and medicine. These are just two basics that mothers provide for their children, essentials that communities need to survive. In the early 1990s, the U.S. imposed sanctions on Iraq that put these essentials out of reach for most mothers. Health clinics couldn't stock their shelves with vital medicines. People couldn't feed their families. Back then, we launched MADRE's Milk and Medicines campaign, focused on delivering life-saving aid. Through this effort, MADRE drove 10 trucks of urgent supplies to Iraqi women and families, defying U.S. sanctions. Today, we're still calling for an end to broad-based economic sanctions wherever women and families need relief from these brutal policies. Economic sanctions block essential trade and commerce, preventing countries from buying basic goods like medicines and food and equipment necessary to provide clean water and health care. These kinds of comprehensive sanctions are often framed as ways to put pressure on governments to change their behavior. But these sanctions don't work. Evidence shows that countries, especially authoritarian states, rarely change practice because of sanctions. Meanwhile, who suffers? The majority of people whose lives have been turned into political bargaining chips. U.S. economic sanctions endanger people's lives. In places like North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran, they've made it hard to deliver humanitarian aid, caused shortages of fuel and electricity, and pushed economies into worsening crisis. Sanctions raise food prices, they degrade water infrastructure, and make fuel more expensive. This makes it harder for women and girls who are often responsible for getting food, water, and fuel for household use to obtain these basic supplies. Today, MADRE is confronting the impact of U.S. economic sanctions. In Iran, we're supporting a Breaking Bread campaign, which works with local bakeries to provide loaves of bread to hundreds of impoverished families. In Venezuela, we're funding access to health information and affordable contraception for women who are facing a dire economic crisis and a broken health system, crises worsened by U.S. sanctions. In North Korea, we provided warm winter boots to children in remote villages where sanctions have deepened poverty. And in Cuba, facing decades of U.S. sanctions that block vital medical supplies, we're helping to supply syringes needed for COVID-19 vaccinations. Meanwhile, President Biden has said that sanctions, quote, will remain a central instrument of U.S. power. So we're keeping pressure on the Biden administration to roll back economic sanctions wherever they threaten human rights. Thank you for standing with us.